it, and today we're talking about the George Harrison album, Cloud 9, his last album released in his lifetime, his solo career. An album that doesn't get discussed a lot, although it was really commercially successful. Cloud 9 was recorded in 1987 from basically January through to most of the year, and released in November of 87, basically after a 5-year break where George didn't do any official albums, although he recorded music in smaller capacities. And it's really notable for the change in sound. It was produced by Jeff Lynne of ELO, and Jeff actually co-wrote a couple of the songs and played on all of the songs. Again, I mentioned it was very commercially successful, hit number 8 in the US, number 10 in the UK, and of course the single Got My Mind Set On You hit number 1 in the US, and that was huge and still remains the last number 1 hit performed by any Beatle, although it was a cover song, so it wasn't written by a Beatle. Bringing in not just Jeff Lynne, but Eric Clapton plays guitar, lead guitar on a lot of the songs. Elton John is playing piano on a lot of the songs. Gary Wright's there, and even Ringo came in for When We Was Fab. So to a lesser extent, he's still bringing in this ensemble. And notable because even though it came out in 1987, you didn't really listen to it until...
Well, I do recall the radio play and the hoopla that George had emerged, not being too visible, to tremendous success out of nowhere, a radio play. I heard it on the radio play. I guess it came out of all of it was Got My Mind Set On You. George had a big hit album, and a couple years went by, and then around 1993, the year you came into the world, I rediscovered Cloud 9, the whole album, and fell in love with almost every track. The album had tremendous meaning to me, I guess, feeling like there was still a friend out there who I had forgotten about, who was back now, and it was George, and it helped me get through a period, and it was a wonderful album.
Yeah, very special to me because of that, obviously, because it's what you were listening to when I was on the way, and
yeah.
I think it was that exact CD version that you had.
That CD was in the car a lot.
And it also crosses into different formats. The reason I bought it on vinyl is because it's like probably one of the last albums that people bought on vinyl and actually listened to on vinyl. It wasn't like a novelty throwback thing, but it was still a primary format that was just starting to switch to tape and CD. The album art is hilarious. The most like dad rock looking photo where George does yacht rock or whatever. And so you becoming a dad and identifying with it is perfect. He's clearly not playing the guitar, which is what I think is so funny. Like the chord doesn't make sense. He's not even holding a pick. The strap is on the wrong shoulder. It's like, for someone who's a virtuoso or whatever, at least of songwriting and everything, like that must have been intentional, all the photos they could have used. And there is something kind of surreal about it. It's not a concept album, but there is almost something heavenly about it, that it's the clouds, the photo is him in the clouds. A lot of the songs have a lot of reverb and they're very ethereal, and the slide playing and
Breath Away from Heaven and all
that.
Yeah,
so he was going for at least some kind of cohesion in the way that it's a full album. And just kind of showing he could do it. And like the end of a Western, before the sheriff puts up his hat for the last time, he went out, got a number 1 hit, that had this majorly successful album, and then he's done. And no other Beatle could do that. Let's go through some of the songs. So Cloud 9 kicks it off, probably one of my favorite songs, has the most unique sound on the album. Very like blues oriented. Double slide, obviously, with Eric Clapton makes it special.
Yeah.
And then the deep brass and the deep vocals from George Harrison, where I read a lot of the contemporary reviews at the time, and people were shocked by how much his voice had dropped in a couple of years.
Oh, I was unaware of that, but great point, because to be ethereal as the song is, and bluesy, but have that low voice, which is so different from the way he sang and any other Beatles sang. Spiritual almost song that wasn't thick and hard to understand as some songs maybe on All Things Must Pass, and it worked, it got to you.
It sounds very dark and moody, but the lyrics are actually kind of uplifting, at least if you read them literally, but there's kind of another edge to it that the music adds. The guitar playing also has a lot of personality in it. You hear a lot of George and Eric's personalities, and I love the foreshadowing of it as it kind of goes into different parts. Sometimes before like the solo or before the chorus, you get these little licks that are amazing.
It's snappy and almost talking to each other along the vocal.
I do like the idea that these guitars are not competing with each other. They're not trying to outdo each other. They have very distinct styles, and they're almost supporting each other and like I would say George kind of takes the back seat and does a little counter melody here and there for Eric, which is so well suited to the song. So that's track 1. Track 2 is That's What It Takes, which is actually a co-write between George Harrison, Jeff Lynne, and Gary Wright. I never knew that.
I never
all
knew
three
that.
of them. So it must have come out of like a bit of a jam or some writing session together. Very poppy chorus, and it makes sense because it's hard for me to imagine that's a melody that George wrote on his own.
There's 3 songs in there. Yeah.
Which is kind of Wilburys-ish, right? Where almost all 3 of them wrote different parts.
And the first part, if I know anything, I would say that's George. The chords are so uniquely George. I mean, it just, when I learned to play it, I was so thrilled. And it's just chords. It's not something so exotic, but he just combines things in an unusual manner.
And all the melody he sings is also so high in that chorus. I just don't think he wrote that, but it's
It makes total sense.
Third track is Fish on the Sand. I think it's a little bit of a mid song. We're getting into the album a little bit now, but it's still showing off the energy of the album. There's not really many other George albums that 3 songs have this much kind of energy, even though Cloud Nine's bluesy.
Yes, I actually made a note. It's so funny what you said, because Fish on the Sand, you know, I was going to analyze it, and it's just good George rock, and it does keep up the energy of the, that's what it takes, and it's just a beat for the first time is really George rock. But I remember hearing this on the radio. I remember hearing this in 1987. One of the songs they were playing was Fish on the Sand. Well, I don't think it's one of the strongest songs on the album, but it was great to hear George. I remember hearing that. You know.
A couple of these album tracks got radio play.
Yes.
Then we've got track 4 is Just for Today. There it is. There's the downer George song. We went, 4 songs before we got it. The fact it's piano driven is a little bit weird too. There's not many George ballads that are like that.
Again, very low vocal, almost breathy and slow. I guess it's part of the motto of AA, and George apparently was aware of that, and I didn't know that at the time. And it took some getting used to, and that's when I kind of rediscovered the album. But it was to me, I'd liked this song. I'd never met anybody else that did. But I mean, it wasn't depressing so much as hold on, and just think of today. And there's 2 great solos in here. I think the second guitar solo on Slide is pretty magnificent, and there's 2 breaks in it, and I enjoyed it.
Then we get This Is Love, which is a co-write with Jeff Lynne, and it's the final single. It was the 3rd single from the album. It didn't do too well. It only hit number 55 in the UK, but I think it's that George rock, but done a little bit more tastefully and uplifting and really catchy, obviously. Very 80s Tom Petty guitar sound. I think George had already been playing with him a bit, so maybe they influenced each other. And almost the whispering vocals he does felt very Tom Petty to me. The solo, and it's fantastic, great slide solo with a little bit, it's not a wah-wah pedal.
That's what I was going to ask you.
I think there's some effect he puts on it.
Yeah, what is that?
I don't know, it might be like a filter.
A special song to me, along the same lines. The lyrics really moved me at the time. Again, this is connected to, I think becoming a father and the year of your birth and that time, and just when I think of the people in life and what love is, I think George scored with me, because I would think of them when I heard this song, and I would think of people that I love, some of whom aren't here, and more than anything, a beautiful new son that was coming into the world. And this song, This Is Love, was kind of encapsulated that to me.
I know you used to always say you love the raindrops before the solo.
When it breaks.
So it's like a synth break,
yeah. I was talking about 80s, right?
Yeah.
Well, of course, I was actually alive then, so I didn't realize, this is going to age and sound like a goofy synth. And I love the lead break in it.
The lead break is so good. I was listening to it. It's really long. It goes into the chorus and then back to the verse.
I love it.
It's like 16 bars or something, and it traces the vocal melody, but then does some other things. And
since we are originally and will be forever after Badfinger people, I think at the time I thought that the solo, and it did, just when he goes into it did hit the Badfinger feeling somewhere in me.
Then the next track is When We Was Fab, which is also a co-write with Jeff Lynne. Never realized that. Second single from the album. It did okay. It hit number 23 in the US, 25 in the UK. So a top 25 hit. Not easy to do. I mean, My Brave Face did that a couple years later, and that was kind of it for the Beatles, getting top 25 hits. It's interesting that this is George, who's not really talking about the Beatles that much. He doesn't really like to look in the past, and yet second song that decade about the Beatles that's hitting the charts.
And more than all those years ago, it has literally the Beatle sound aura in it, created from post-era, circa 1967, 8.
And that's what's interesting too, is people, when he looks back on the Beatles, at least at this time, it was very magical mystery tour Beatles, right?
Yes.
With the orchestra and the sitar. I don't think he's mocking it. I think that's what he found special about the Beatles.
Literally evoked imagery and the sound without it being a literal Beatles song and of that time.
And the mood of it's so interesting, because I was debating as I listened to it, I changed my mind every verse or so. Like some lyrics sound melancholic, other times he's like angry, other times he's kind of apathetic. So his tone really was like, I don't know how he feels about the Beatles. That's what makes it a little mystical and strange. Well, your favorite was always the microscopes that magnify the tears, which he sounds pretty bitter about.
Yes.
But then the back when income tax was all we had, he's kind of flippant. So it really depends on is he sincere about any of this? And then the backing vocals pretty creepy. They're really ELO though. The fab give or whatever. That's really 1987 George. So I don't know. That it was an interesting thing. I always thought it was very unique. But then in the album, he that kind of stuff is on a lot of tracks.
I think Jeff Lynne did something to do with this and at that time, and it was hitting familiar Beatle kind of feelings deep inside here and there.
We flip it over to side 2 of the vinyl if we're listening to that, and the first track was Devil's Radio. It fits the album in theme, distractions maybe, distractions from heaven or whatever, but the sound is so different, right? Like George always had songs like this on the album where it just takes away all the spirituality.
A little bit of an angrier George.
Yeah, and the way that he offset the words though, the chord, I was thinking of, it's kind of like a mini Got My Mind Set on You. I wonder which was recorded first, where the gossip, like he kind of does that same part A, part B, and they switch the back.
Yeah, it's a counterpoint to it.
Yeah, it seems very much like Got My Mind Set on You is already influenced by
in that sense, yeah.
Eric's stretching out a little bit more, and I know at the time, I think this was reviewed positively, that he's doing counterpoint to George's vocals. I think it's a little, doesn't feel like a George Harrison song.
It took me getting used to it. I would put it with several others we'll get to that would be towards the back of the line of the songs that I love. George didn't like the media too much, and of any kind, and it comes through in this.
He's not like John or something where he kind of goes through and shocks you with his expletives or anything like that, but it's almost that whispering bitterness, right? And he says like something, there's one of the lyrics where it's like nothing else has space to grow.
Yes.
It's an insult you almost don't even catch. Right, it seems like he's just talking calmly, but when you listen to it, you're like, "Oh wow, this is pretty vicious."
You wonder why I don't get out much. I wonder how you can't see or something like that. It's a pretty angry George. Yeah. It is.
The back half here, I think, is the weakest part of the album, and I don't really go to it very much. Someplace Else is okay. I think that's where it starts to taper off. It's kind of the classic hypnotic George ballad. He's got these on albums where I think compared to the 70s, I actually do like the melody here. I don't think he overdoes it too much. That might be because his range and everything was already getting a little bit smaller, but I can see the same song in the 70s. He would have gone crazy with some of the melody and pitch and everything, and I think he reins it in more here. It's got to be an edit from the verse to the chorus where he's like kind of yelling and the chorus is so soft. It doesn't make sense. It's got to be a different take, and so that always seems kind of abrupt.
Again, grew on me, and of course it's in the movie, and his whole experience with Shanghai Surprise, I think it was, with Sean Penn and Madonna, et cetera, et cetera. It's the George chords building, you don't always hear from someone else.
Wreck of the Hesperus, I think you call that as not being one of your favorites. Yeah, I mean, it's a chaotic blues band song with a lot of dad puns. It works with the cover art, but it's not something you come back to, right?
It never really connected with me.
Breath Away from Heaven, it sounds out of place to have this kind of Chinese Hong Kong themed song on the album.
I didn't know anything about it being connected to the movie at the time. Just the way he recorded it with the boom at the bass and the boom, and it wasn't one of the top ones on the album, but I enjoyed it. And
then the album ends with track 11, Got My Mind Set on You. Kind of interesting to end with the single. I can't think of a lot of albums that do that. Doesn't really fit the album. It's the only cover on the album, but it's not the only cover George ever did like that, and that's something I didn't really realize. I think reflecting on it now, there are a lot of albums in the 70s and even, I guess, Don Troppo. So he does cover one song on the album a lot, and it's sometimes obscure 50s songs. He does weird versions of it or Everly Brothers stuff. I don't think they ever really worked as singles. This one, he is adding his own touch to it, and there's obviously a reason this landed with George singing it and with Jeff Lynne producing it.
The only cover on the album and the biggest hit.
And it works perfectly for his range here again, where he's doing the low thing we talked about. He does the low melody and then the high melody, and it's all perfect for him. You got the hand claps, the brass, the backing vocals, everything. All that ELO production works really well for this song. And then the solo is perfect too. I love the trade-off with the brass and the lead guitar. It does get a little monotonous. You got the Weird Al version of this song is only 6 words long.
This song is just 6 words long. This song is just 6 words long. This song is just 6 words.
Which is great. I mean, it's the perfect parody to it because he doesn't say a whole lot else in it. And then, of course, what helped it land also, because it's the 80s, is that video, right? There were 2 videos shot, but the second one is really the one that got the MTV play, him in the chair. And
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and he got everybody head nodding and then him doing the flips, and that sensationalized the song.
the public relations of this whole album would be an interesting story, I think, because it was as though a monk who had been, isolated in a monastery came out, and he had been making records throughout that time, so he didn't really disappear, but this emerged and he emerged, and the interviews are almost like it was his first, like he was a new personality that became a huge guy out of nowhere, and it was very successful. But mainly, I think got my mind set on You and When We Was Fab was the success that I remember from Airplay.
The album did well too, but yeah, I think it's just so strange to me what an outlier this is. There's not that many cases of it where, first off, what it really inspired him. We know John was inspired, and he had this rebirth in 1980, and he was influenced by Paul, and there was did that happen to George? Because he didn't really want to tour. Eric dragged him out in Japan. What made him all of a sudden want to go out and put the effort into recording the song with Jeff Lynne? And then I think with Wilburys, he was still a little bit interested in all of that. What made it disappear forever? And I always wonder if it was because of the success of this, he felt vindicated and he could stop, or was it in spite of that, he still said it's not worth it? And we'll never know, right? Love to hear what people think.
Let's hear what people think, because that's not an easy, quick answer of why. I mean, obviously, listen to Devil's Radio and all those songs. He was maybe the most bitter in some way about the Beatles experience. John had his shot at it, but kind of, I think, rebounded and was rebounding. George, in some sense, and this is, I guess, open for debate, but it just seems like he had the most bitterness about the experience.
Maybe to that point, there's not a lot of bitterness on the album. It's there. I mean, it's there on Devil's Radio. It's there on Cloud 9 a little bit in tone. But it's a pretty poppy album, and he didn't really ever do that.
No, never did that.
So something made him decide to make it a poppier, lighter weight album. And I think that's also maybe why it doesn't rank as high today. Because although it did really well commercially at the time, I don't think people go back to it with the same depth. It didn't have the same intentionality and the demos and all of the kind of emotions behind it that he had when he recorded All Things Must Pass or Living in the Material World.
Again, considering the success that it way presented at the time, it's not a big part of his story as it's told today.
There aren't really any songs on it that are autobiographical. Yeah. We don't know what George was doing in the 80s. I mean, at least John, a single, is just like Starting Over. He's telling you how he feels. Got My Mind Set on You is a cover. I mean, George is not revealing anything to the public. It's interesting. I hope we get the deluxe edition. I'd love to hear outtakes. I'd love to hear if there's other material from these sessions. And I know this was a bit of a curveball, but I just thought it'd be a fun one to review. Let us know what you think.